The courtroom fell silent in a way that no one was prepared for. When the judge finally spoke, the reaction was instant. Gasps from the gallery, shocked expressions from reporters, and fans frozen in disbelief. K-Flock, once one of the fastest rising stars in drill music, was now standing at the center of a moment that would define the rest of his life. What many expected to be a routine sentencing turned into a scene that left everyone stunned. For months, fans have been glued to updates, rumors, and leaked details surrounding the case. Some believed the sentence would be lighter. Others feared the worst. But when the final decision was read out loud, it became clear that reality had hit harder than anyone imagined. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Hope drained, shock took over, and the weight of the moment became undeniable. This wasn't just a legal outcome. It was the end of an era for a generation of fans who watched K-Flock rise from the Bronx streets to viral fame almost overnight. Outside the courtroom, social media exploded within minutes. Fans flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok with emotional reactions, anger, sadness, disbelief, and confusion all colliding at once. Some questioned how things went so wrong so fast. Others blamed the system, and many couldn't stop replaying the same thought. How did a teenager with the world watching end up here? The sentence didn't just shock the room. It shook the entire hip-hop community. K-Flock's journey had always been intense. His music reflected real life, raw energy, and the harsh realities of the streets. But now, those same realities had caught up to him in the most public way possible. As the cameras captured every second, fans couldn't help but notice the expressions, the body language, and the heavy atmosphere that filled the courtroom. This wasn't music anymore. This was real life, and there was no undo button. Tonight, we're breaking down exactly what happened in that courtroom, why the sentence stunned everyone, and what this means for K-Flock's future. Because this wasn't just a verdict. It was a moment that changed everything, and fans still can't believe it. The tension inside the courtroom was heavy long before the judge entered. Wooden benches creaked as people shifted in their seats. Reporters quietly adjusted their notes. And K-Flock stood there knowing this moment had been building for years. For many in the room, it didn't feel real yet. This was the same kid they'd watched blow up online, rack up millions of views, and become one of the most talked about names in drill music almost overnight. Now he was no longer an artist on a screen. He was a defendant waiting to hear how much of his life would be decided in a single moment. As the proceedings began, the courtroom atmosphere felt cold and unforgiving. Every word from the prosecution echoed louder than expected, outlining a timeline that fans already knew pieces of, but hearing it laid out in a formal setting made it hit differently. Moments that once felt distant or debated online were now framed as facts, presented with documents, witness statements, and evidence that carried serious weight. K-Flock kept his posture steady, but those close enough could see the tension in his face. This wasn't the stage. There was no beat, no microphone, no crowd cheering him on. The judge listened carefully, expression unreadable. When the defense spoke, they painted a different picture, one of youth, pressure, and a life shaped by an environment where survival often comes before long-term thinking. They reminded the court how quickly K-Flock's fame came, how sudden attention can amplify every mistake, and how a young man can lose direction when success collides with unresolved street realities. For fans watching later through clips and recaps, this was the first time many truly understood how complex the situation was beyond headlines and viral tweets. In the gallery, emotions were mixed. Some supporters bowed their heads quietly. Others stayed forward, trying to hold on to hope. A few family members looked visibly shaken, their faces carrying a pain that couldn't be captured fully by cameras. This wasn't just about a sentence. It was about years that could never be returned. Every second dragged as everyone waited for the moment that would define what came next. When the judge finally began speaking, the room went completely still. Even the smallest sounds seemed too loud. The judge's voice was calm, measured, and deliberate, emphasizing responsibility, consequences, and the seriousness of the situation. There was no anger in the tone, but there was finality. Each sentence felt like a door closing, one after another. For K-Flock, It was the sound of reality setting in. No more speculation, no more what ifs. As the sentence was delivered, the shock was immediate. Some people gasped softly, others covered their mouths. A few supporters shook their heads in disbelief. This wasn't what many had expected, even those who knew the case was serious. The weight of the decision hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. K-Flock remained composed, but his expression told a story of its own, a mix of realization, regret, and the understanding that life had permanently changed. Outside the courtroom, the reaction was just as intense. News spread fast. Phones buzzed nonstop as updates hit social media. Fans struggled to process what they were hearing. Some refused to believe it at first, convinced there had to be a mistake. Others expressed anger, sadness, or frustration, questioning how someone so young and talented could end up here. The same platforms that once celebrated his rise were now flooded with posts mourning what could have been. This moment forced a hard conversation within the culture. K-Flock wasn't just another rapper facing legal trouble. He represented a generation growing up fast, gaining fame faster, and often lacking the guidance to navigate it safely. His story mirrored others before him, yet it still felt shocking because it happened in real time, right in front of millions. The courtroom wasn't just sentencing one person. It was reflecting a cycle people had seen too many times. As K-Flock was led away, the silence returned. No applause, no music, just the sound of footsteps and the reality settling in. For fans, this was the end of one chapter, but also the beginning of a long, uncertain future. The stunned reactions weren't just about the number of years. They were about lost potential, unanswered questions, and the painful reminder that talent alone isn't enough to escape consequences. That day didn't just leave the courtroom stunned. It left an entire fanbase trying to understand how everything changed so fast and why stories like this keep repeating themselves. The hours following the sentencing felt unreal for everyone connected to the case. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed to file updates while supporters gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed voices as if saying too much might somehow make it worse. K-Flock's name was everywhere again, but this time it wasn't attached to music charts or viral performances. It was tied to a decision that would define the rest of his life. The shock hadn't worn off yet, and for many fans, it still didn't feel real. Online, the reaction exploded almost immediately. Social media timelines flooded with clips from the courtroom, emotional posts, and raw reactions from fans who had followed K-Flock since his earliest days. Some were angry, blaming the system and calling the sentence excessive. Others expressed heartbreak, posting old freestyle clips and music videos, mourning a future that now felt stolen. The same platforms that once helped launch his career were now filled with disbelief and pain, showing just how deeply his story had resonated with people. As details of the sentencing spread, fans began revisiting K-Flock's rise from the beginning. People replayed the early moments, his breakout tracks, the buzz around his name, and the way his energy felt different from everyone else's. He wasn't just another artist. He was seen as a voice of the Bronx, someone who captured raw emotion and street reality in a way that felt authentic. Looking back, many started asking hard questions. Were the warning signs always there? Was this outcome inevitable? Or could things have gone differently? The conversation quickly grew beyond K-Flock himself. His sentencing reopened long-standing debates about drill culture, street influence, and how quickly young artists are thrown into environments they're not prepared to navigate. Fans pointed out how sudden fame can magnify existing problems, turning small conflicts into life-altering situations. Others discussed how the music industry benefits from the image but rarely steps in when artists need real guidance or protection. The sentence didn't just affect one person. It exposed cracks in a system people had been questioning for years. Those closest to K-Flock were dealing with a different kind of pain. Family members and friends had to accept a reality they had feared but hoped wouldn't happen. The courtroom images stayed burned into people's minds. The stillness, the tension, the moment everything changed. For them, this wasn't a viral topic or online debate. It was personal, emotional, and permanent. No amount of online support could undo what had already been decided. Meanwhile, the media continued dissecting every angle. Analysts debated whether the judge had sent a message, whether the sentence reflected broader efforts to crack down on violence, and how high-profile cases like this shape public perception. Some argued the ruling was meant to deter others. Others believed it highlighted how little room there is for redemption once the legal system takes control. Each discussion added another layer to an already heavy moment. Fans also began to notice how quiet things felt without K-Flock's presence. No new snippets, no social media updates, no anticipation of the next release. The silence made the sentence feel even heavier. For an artist whose voice had once been everywhere, the absence was loud. It forced people to confront how fast things can disappear and how fragile success really is. In the days after, tributes and messages of support continued pouring in. People shared lyrics that now sounded different in hindsight, lines that felt prophetic or heartbreaking. Others posted messages urging younger artists to learn from this situation, to move smarter, and to understand that talent doesn't make anyone untouchable. K-Flock's story had shifted from inspiration to warning, and that transition was difficult for many to accept. What made this moment hit so hard was how public it all was. Fans didn't hear about it years later. They watched it unfold step by step. From the rise to the arrest, from the court dates to the final sentence, everything happened in real time. That transparency made the outcome feel more personal, more painful, and impossible to ignore. It wasn't a distant headline, it was a shared experience. As the shock slowly turned into reflection, one thing became clear. This sentencing wasn't just about punishment. It forced a conversation about choices, environments, and the realities faced by young people growing up fast under a spotlight. K-Flock's name would no longer just be associated with drill music. It would be tied to a moment that made fans stop, think, and question how many similar stories are still unfolding right now. The courtroom had been stunned, but the aftershocks were still spreading. For fans, this wasn't closure. It was the beginning of a long, uncomfortable realization that sometimes the music stops suddenly, and what's left behind is silence, regret, and the heavy cost of decisions made too early. As time passed, the initial shock began to settle into something heavier and more reflective. Fans weren't just reacting anymore, they were trying to understand. Questions started replacing anger. How did someone with so much momentum end up here? At what point did the story shift from ambition to inevitability? The sentencing forced people to rewind the timeline and look closely at moments that once seemed small but now felt crucial. Many began revisiting interviews, lyrics, and old social media posts, searching for clues. Lines that once sounded like bravado or street storytelling now felt like warnings hidden in plain sight. There was a new weight to the music, as if every bar carried the shadow of what was coming. Supporters debated whether the art was a reflection of reality or a performance that went too far. That line between image and life suddenly felt dangerously thin. Within the hip-hop community, reactions were mixed but intense. Some artists posted messages of support, urging fans not to forget K-Flock as a human being behind the headlines. Others stayed silent, knowing how complicated it can be to comment on a case like this. The silence itself spoke volumes. It highlighted how common these situations have become, and how often people don't know what to say anymore because the pattern feels tragically familiar. The conversation also shifted toward accountability. While many sympathized with K-Flock, others argued that talent doesn't erase consequences. They pointed out that choices matter, no matter how young or gifted someone is. This sparked heated debates online, with fans clashing over responsibility, environment, and whether the system truly offers second chances. Some felt the punishment ignored the context of where he came from. Others believed it was the inevitable result of actions that couldn't be overlooked. What made the discussion even more complex was K-Flock's age and influence. To younger fans, he wasn't just an artist, he was proof that someone from their neighborhood could make it. His success felt personal to them. Now, his sentencing felt like a loss of hope, not just for him, but for what he represented. Parents, educators, and community voices began using the situation as a cautionary example. trying to steer the next generation away from the same path. Behind the scenes, the industry continued moving forward, but something felt off. New artists dropped music, charts updated, and trends shifted, yet K-Flock's absence lingered. People noticed how quickly the spotlight can move on, even from someone once considered unstoppable. That realization was sobering. Fame, it seemed, offers attention but not protection. When things fall apart, you're often left to face it alone. Legal experts weighed in as well, explaining the broader implications of the sentence. They talked about precedent, deterrence, and how high-profile cases influence future rulings. To them, it was a matter of law. To fans, it was a life being defined by a single outcome. That disconnect made the situation even more painful, showing how differently the same event can be experienced depending on where you stand. As days turned into weeks, supporters tried to find ways to keep K-Flock's legacy alive. Fan pages posted throwback clips, unreleased snippets, and messages of encouragement. Some organized online campaigns calling for appeals or reform, even if the chances were slim. These efforts weren't just about changing the outcome. They were about refusing to let his story end in silence. At the same time, reality continued to set in. There would be no quick comeback, no surprise drop, no redemption arc anytime soon. The music that already existed would have to carry the weight of everything left unsaid. For many, listening became bittersweet. Each song felt like a reminder of what could have been, and what now never would be. This stage of the story wasn't loud like the sentencing day. It was quieter, heavier, and more personal. It lived in late-night thoughts, long comment threads, and private conversations among fans who felt genuinely affected. The courtroom moment may have stunned everyone, but this aftermath forced people to sit with the consequences, without the noise of headlines to distract them. In the end, the story of K-Flock began to shift again, not toward closure, but toward reflection. It became less about outrage and more about understanding the cost of certain choices, the pressures of sudden fame, and the unforgiving nature of the system once a line is crossed. The shock was gone, but the impact remained, settling deep and leaving a mark that wouldn't fade anytime soon. As the dust continued to settle, a different kind of conversation began to take shape, one that wasn't fueled by shock or anger, but by reflection and fear. People started asking what this case meant for the culture as a whole. K-Flock's sentencing no longer felt like an isolated moment. It felt like another chapter in a long, repeating cycle that too many young artists seem unable to escape. And that realization made it even heavier. In neighborhoods similar to where K-Flock came from, his story hit especially hard. Young kids who once memorized his lyrics and copied his style were now watching adults debate his fate online. For them, this wasn't just news, it was a warning playing out in real time. Many saw themselves in his rise. The hunger, the raw energy, the belief that music could be a way out. Now they were being forced to confront the other side of that dream, the part no one wants to talk about until it's too late. Community voices started speaking up more loudly. Mentors, former street figures, and local organizers used the moment to talk about guidance, discipline, and the lack of real support systems for young talent. They pointed out how quickly artists are pushed into the spotlight without being taught how to survive it. The pressure to maintain an image, to appear fearless and untouchable, often comes at the cost of smart decision-making. K-Flock's situation became a painful example of what happens when that pressure wins. Meanwhile, fans noticed a shift in how his music was being discussed. Songs that once sparked excitement were now analyzed like historical documents. People broke down lyrics line by line, connecting themes of violence, paranoia, and loyalty to real-life consequences. Some argued that the music was honest storytelling, not instruction. Others felt the culture rewards the most extreme narratives, encouraging artists to live what they rap. The debate had no clear answer, but it refused to die. The media's role also came under scrutiny. Headlines that once celebrated K-Flock's buzz now focused entirely on his downfall. Some fans felt the coverage was cold and opportunistic, treating his life as content rather than tragedy. Others admitted that attention is often conditional, celebrated when things are going well, judgmental when they aren't. The same platforms that helped amplify his voice were now dissecting his mistakes, reminding everyone how unforgiving public opinion can be. Inside the industry, there was quiet tension. Labels, producers, and executives were paying attention, even if they weren't speaking publicly. High-profile cases like this force uncomfortable questions behind closed doors. How much responsibility does the industry have when artists self-destruct? Is profit prioritized over protection? And what happens to the next young rapper being pushed forward with the same intensity, but without the tools to handle it? For Kay Flock himself, time had slowed down in a way most people couldn't imagine. While the world debated, analyzed, and moved on to the next headline, his reality became small and rigid. Days defined by routine, silence, and reflection. That contrast between the loudness of the internet and the stillness of confinement made the situation even more haunting. Fame doesn't follow you into those walls. Only your thoughts do. Fans struggled with that image. Many admitted they couldn't stop thinking about how quickly everything changed. One moment, he was a rising star with momentum. The next, his future was being measured in years behind bars. That whiplash forced people to confront how fragile success really is, especially when it's built in environments where danger is always close. As weeks went by, emotions evolved again. Anger faded into sadness. Sadness turned into acceptance for some, while others refused to let go of hope entirely. Conversations about appeals, legal options, and long-term possibilities continued, even if they were uncertain. Hope, even when unrealistic, became a way for fans to cope with the finality of the sentence. What lingered most was the sense of loss, not just of freedom, but of potential. People kept returning to that idea. What could have been? How far could he have gone if things had unfolded differently? That question had no answer, and that made it hurt more. Potential is painful when it's cut short, because it exists only in imagination. This phase of the story didn't trend the way the sentencing did. It wasn't flashy or explosive. It was quiet, reflective, and uncomfortable. It lived in long comment threads, late-night discussions, and moments when a song came on unexpectedly and hit harder than before. The case had moved past the courtroom, but its impact was still unfolding in the minds of everyone watching. By now, it was clear this wasn't just about one artist anymore. It was about patterns, systems, and the cost of growing up too fast in a world that doesn't forgive mistakes easily. Kay Flock's name had become part of a larger conversation, one that people wished they didn't have to keep having, but knew they couldn't ignore. By this point, the story had fully transformed from a shocking headline into a long-lasting reality that people were forced to live with. Kay Flock's name no longer trended every hour, but it never really disappeared either. It settled into conversations the way unfinished stories do. Always present, always heavy. For fans, the hardest part wasn't the sentence itself anymore, but the slow understanding that life was moving forward without him. As months passed, the world kept spinning. New artists rose, new songs dominated playlists, and new controversies replaced old ones. But for those who truly followed Kay Flock's journey, nothing felt the same. Every time a young rapper from the Bronx went viral, people couldn't help but compare paths. They wondered who would be next, who would make it out clean, and who might end up repeating the same mistakes. His story became a reference point, a silent warning attached to every new breakout moment. There was also a noticeable change in how fans consumed music. Some admitted they listened more carefully now, paying attention not just to sound, but to what artists were really saying. Lyrics about paranoia, retaliation, and survival felt heavier, less entertaining. What once sounded like confidence now felt like pressure. Kay Flock's situation made people realize that music isn't always separate from reality. Sometimes it's a mirror, and sometimes it's a trap. Conversations about responsibility grew deeper. Fans debated whether the burden should fall entirely on the artist, or whether the culture, the industry, and even the audience share some blame. After all, violent authenticity is often rewarded with views, streams, and attention. When that authenticity turns into real-life consequences, support suddenly becomes complicated. K-Flock's case forced people to look at their own role as consumers and ask uncomfortable questions about what they celebrate. For younger listeners especially, the impact was profound. Many had seen K-Flock as proof that talent and hustle could change everything. Now they were learning that talent alone isn't enough to protect you from bad decisions or bad timing. Mentors and older voices used his story to push a different message, one about discipline, patience, and moving smarter than the environment you come from. Whether that message would truly stick remained uncertain, but the lesson was there. Meanwhile, K-Flock's existing music began to take on a new purpose. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It became his voice frozen in time. Fans treated each track like a memory, replaying verses with a sense of loss attached. Some songs felt motivational, others heartbreaking. Listening became emotional because people knew there wouldn't be new chapters anytime soon. What existed was all there was. The idea of redemption still lingered, though quietly. Some believed that growth doesn't stop just because freedom does. They hoped that time away from the chaos might eventually lead to reflection, maturity, and a different kind of future, one that didn't revolve around headlines or street validation. Whether realistic or not, that hope mattered. It reminded people that even in the darkest outcomes, humanity doesn't disappear. What stood out most by the end was how permanent consequences feel when you're watching them happen to someone so young. K-Flock's sentencing wasn't just a punishment. It was a pause on a life that had barely started. That truth sat uncomfortably with fans long after the cameras left the courtroom. It made people think about how quickly moments define entire futures. In a way, the stunned silence that followed the sentencing never fully went away. It just became quieter, more internal. The outrage faded, the debates slowed, but the lesson remained. Success without stability is fragile. Fame without guidance is dangerous. And talent, no matter how real, doesn't make anyone immune. By the time people stopped asking what happened and started asking why, the story had already done its damage, and its teaching. K-Flock's name would always carry two meanings now: the sound of potential and the weight of loss. And for everyone watching from the outside, that duality became impossible to forget. If this story made you stop and think, you're not alone. K-Flock's journey is more than music or headlines. It's a real-life lesson about choices, pressure, and how fast everything can change. If you believe these conversations matter, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss deeper breakdowns like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the system failed K-Flock? Or was this outcome unavoidable? What lessons should young artists take from this? Your voice matters, hey. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story, and stay locked in with us as we continue breaking down the real stories behind the headlines.